Hello and welcome to a Week 14 Thursday Night Football Showdown edition. Battle of the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger against Kirk Cousins, the much maligned Kirk Cousins, who will be playing without Adam Thielen. To discuss tonight's Showdown slate, I am joined with the Showdown virgin himself, Cody Main, wearing his "Don't Dupe Me, Bro" shirt. Good afternoon, good evening.
Shout out to Overzet for the hoodie. It hasn't brought me much luck yet after wearing it for, a week straight of Showdown slates. It also doesn't smell near as good when I got it after wearing it for a week's worth of Showdown slates. But ready to dive into this one. This one's going to be a fun one.
I'm not sure if you're aware, Cody, but your humble King GPP bro here was in solo fourth last Thursday night after we did the show before the in the lotto. I mean, I rarely play the lotto, but I decided to fire into the lotto because I felt good about a lot of things that we talked about. I blast into the lotto. I mean, maybe I'm the King Showdown virgin now. I mean, solo fourth, and yeah, of course, I didn't finish solo fourth, but that's just details.
I mean, you're already the cash game, bro. You've taken over, for much of the ETR staff as the GPP bro. You can't be coming for the crown as the Showdown King. It's just too much. It's too much. Know your limits. Know your limits.
Oh God, I know. Everybody's asking about my hat. I know. I don't know if I've ever streamed without my hat before. It's been a long day. I can't find any of my hats, so is what it is. We're gonna press on here. This slate, I think, is interesting because we have the Dalvin Cook situation. We have the Adam Thielen situation. We have the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger situation. We have a lot of kind of moving parts along with this slate, and I kind of like these as well. What do you think about this slate as a whole? Because we don't typically see Pittsburgh in like dome games where like they're playing a really bad defense. I feel like every time I look at the Steelers, it's like, oh, they're outside in bad weather against the freaking Browns or something like that, or the Ravens, and it's just like some shitty spot. This, I think, actually could make Ben Roethlisberger look okay tonight. What do you think about this spot as a whole?
We've had a few of these spots actually in Showdown slates with Big Ben and the Steelers as of late. We had them against the Chargers where I feel like a few of their guys looked really well. And same thing tonight. I think that's the first thing that jumps off the page is there's a few guys that you really get excited for on the Steelers, mainly starting with Deontay Johnson and Naji Harris. But, I might have to take the GPP bro card back here, but I think you can kind of talk yourself into a $9,000 Big Ben, which if you're not consistently playing showdowns, $9,000 is like the stone floor for a quarterback. So, I think with Big Ben priced down, I think with Deontay in a good spot and getting legit volume, and then Naji being a true bell cow, I think you can talk yourselves into quite a few plays on the Steelers side. And I think that's really the jumping off point. If you go down to the table, I think we're going to see a lot of these Vikings heavy teams once again, because we do have Adam Thielen out and we've got some of the best values popping on that side too, alongside just a massive projection on Justin Jefferson. So, I think just from a starting point, and I know this is kind of where we kick things off most often, but I think from a starting point, you can really get excited about some of these 2-4 teams that feature more Steelers because you have some really good plays on the Steelers side for once.
Yeah, and the 1-5 actually intrigues me too. Like I don't have a lot of conviction on who wins this game and who doesn't. So if the field has conviction where they're not going to play Steelers stuff at all, that grabs my attention right away here. Obviously, this 1 here refers to the Vikings. The favorite 5 refers to the Steelers, and this is how often Cody and our projections think that these type of constructions will be used by the field. What do you think about that? Just from a high level, 1-5 Steelers and 2-4 Steelers. Seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough because even those 1-5 teams, like where you're prioritizing, say, Justin Jefferson, the optimizer, and just generically hand building, you're going to want to force in Kirk Cousins on those teams. So I think that you're naturally going to get even more 2-4 as we see projected than 1-5, but you just get massive leverage right from the start, and you don't have to do necessarily as many crazy things outside of just your overall roster construction. Like you can get away with playing 5 good Steelers just because very few people are going to do that without having to get off the board with some of these, pure punt plays.
Okay, you mentioned the cheap tag on Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, he looks absolutely awful, but for an old quarterback to get right, yeah, short week isn't great, but in a dome against a bad pass defense, against a Minnesota team that inflates opponent plays and also struggles in pass defense, like this would be a spot that actually works for Ben Roethlisberger, in my opinion. And then on the other side, it's interesting because we haven't seen Kirk Cousins play without Adam Thielen a lot, and he's clearly locked on to Adam Thielen around the goal line. They will use KJ Osborne there, which we'll talk about in a second here. But what do you think about Cousins captain or Cousins flex? And I know you already mentioned Ben, but maybe some other thoughts on Ben.
I haven't made the final decision on whether Cousins is going to make my MME run in the captain pool. I try not to right out exclude players, especially with guys like Cousins who have good projections. But I think I do want to prioritize some of those skill position players with a ceiling. So if he's coming through, I might just outright exclude him and get more ownership concentrated on some of these top skill position players. But I think we really get talked into these massive outlier games that we don't necessarily need on these slates where we only have 20 some plays to choose from. We don't need a 99th percentile outcome for guys like Kirk Cousins or Ben Roethlisberger to crack optimal lineups. And Cousins has been over 25 points on many occasions this week. And I think this week that, even without Thielen, I think you could still see him kind of approach that level. I just worry that a lot of the production is a lot more concentrated on Justin Jefferson in those outcomes. So even if we get a good Cousins game, I think most of it comes through Jefferson. So in those lineups where I do think they play well, I'm just prioritizing Jefferson at captain and rolling out Cousins in the flex. But I think in terms of cash game plays, I think you're considering both of these quarterbacks, even Big Ben at 9K. He just kind of fits builds with prioritizing an $11,000 Justin Jefferson and Deontay Johnson, who we'll get to. The value on this slate isn't all that great. I think they rightly priced up Conklin and KJ Osborne. And there's just not a whole lot of like sub 4K value plays that we can get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, on the Cousins thing, I think you are less explosive when you lose Adam Thielen and you go to DD Westbrook and KJ Osborne, but doesn't mean he can't overcome that. Steelers, I've kind of gone back and forth on this defensively on the Steelers. Like, you can definitely run on them, and you like from a stats perspective, you can do a lot of things against their defense. I just think that their scheme, and with TJ Watt and Cam Hayward right now, like with their scheme, like they can also smother people at times. So I think there's a really wide range of outcomes for how Kirk Cousins plays here, like really wide. Like I could see 25 points and I could see 10. I could see either one. And I think we should build lineups accordingly, understanding that variance. Running back position. Well, we got surprising news. I mean, I didn't think there's any way Dalvin Cook was playing in this game. Separated shoulders or shoulder or whatever. Alexander Madison playing at least 90% of Dalvin Cook's capacity. Why rush Dalvin Cook back here? Sounds like they are. Per Adam Schefter, Dalvin's going to have his regular role. I don't know if I buy that completely. As you can see, we have Alexander Madison mixing in a little bit more than usual. But still, Schefter doesn't typically tweet stuff like that unless he's pretty sure about it. So we are going with what do we have, Cody? Like 80-20 or something like that? Dalvin over Madison or so. Dalvin, you're not going to get a discount on Dalvin though. So what do you think about him? And it's kind of an awkward spot.
Yeah, it was tough because writing this up, like you can get really excited about Madison at 9,800 when we thought Dalvin Cook was going to be out. And I know you touched on this last week on the Friday show and for the main slate that like the role for Madison when Cook is out is almost even better than the role that Cook has because you're not dealing with two backs in this backfield. And as the days gone on, as more news has come out throughout the day with Dalvin, we've kind of bumped up the projection. We've really got him pretty close to a full workload as Schefter has reported. I think we're still just a little bit shy, kind of baking in some downside risk there a little bit in case, risk for re-injury or risk that, this is a little bit of gamesmanship, whatever it may be. But I think if anything, we're going to get a full workload out of Cook. And I think people are still going to shy away from selecting him, especially in the captain with Jefferson, $200 more expensive. Then you've got Naji, $800 cheaper. You got Deontay Johnson, who is also a good play on the Steelers side. So I think we're going to get pretty good ownership on Dalvin Cook. And if you want to take the chance at re-injury or that, Mike Zimmer is trolling us or whatever it may be, I think you're going to get pretty good leverage there on Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my first instinct is not to click on Dalvin Cook at 10,800 given what we know about his injuries. But I mean, if the Schefter report is right and he has a regular workload and you get an ownership discount, that's going to be a standout play. Just got to say two things here. First of all, Cody mentioned Mike Zimmer. Shout out to Mike Zimmer, captain of Team Sex. If you haven't yet, and I'm sure everybody has by now, you need to Google Mike Zimmer girlfriend. Second of all, Little Toonshi is telling me to put a damn hat on. Little Toonshi. Good luck getting me down to the FanDuel projections, buddy. I mean,
oh no.
GG Toonshi. All right. On the other side, we saw Naji Harris, who has had some kind of, I don't want to say up and down usage because it's been elite all year, but sometimes it's like 100% and sometimes it's like 80%. Last week, it was at like 97%. for Naji Harris. And so, I mean, it's obviously a massive workload against this Minnesota team. Would not surprise me at all to see Naji outscore Dalvin Cook tonight, even if Dalvin Cook is healthy. What do you think about Naji tonight? And I don't think we can really play any other Steelers backs, even maybe in MME stuff. I don't know, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, as far as Naji goes, I mean, the role has been elite, and it doesn't really matter whether they're playing with a lead or whether they're playing from behind. He's getting all the work. They're not mixing in, other guys in the backfield. So whether they're playing from behind, I think that he's still going to get the target share. So even in these scripts, like we talked about the 2-4, if you want to roll out 4 Steelers, even in these scripts where the game may be closer than we're expecting, or the Vikings come out with a lead, Najee's still going to get peppered, I think, with targets because Big Ben just can't throw the ball downfield. I don't think Big Ben wants to throw the ball downfield. So I'm not really ruling Naji out of these teams that even project the Vikings to win. Yeah. He leads the running back position in targets. He's playing on 82% of long down and distance snaps, 95% of 2-minute snaps. The matchup, I think, is fine against the Vikings rush defense. So I've got a lot of interest in Naji, especially in those 2-4 builds where we're prioritizing the Steelers.
Yep. Okay. The interesting part of the slate is that wide receiver, and a big part of it is KJ Osborne. You mentioned you thought that DraftKings did a good job. KJ Osborne 5,600 still sticks out to me as a really good ceiling. At 5,600, though, I think he will be very, very owned. What do you think the Vikings do without Thielen? He's had such a big red zone role. They're obviously going to play Jefferson and Osborne on every single snap. Like, I think KJ Osborne will likely play 100% of the snaps, and DD Westbrook will be in there in the slot, I think, when they need him in 3 wide. But what do you think the Vikings pass game and wide receivers look like? And we can bring tight end in here too, where obviously Tyler Conklin, I think, is a bit overpriced at 6,200. But when you're filling red zone role like Thielen has, I mean, we've seen the Vikings through the years with Irv Smith, with Kyle Rudolph, with Conklin scheme a lot of stuff in here, like plays inside the 5-yard line for tight ends. So what do you think about Vikings pass game?
Yeah, they just vacate so many targets with Thielen gone, and obviously red zone targets and end zone targets. The connection between Thielen and Cousins has been insane. And every time we think touchdown regression is coming for Thielen, he just keeps producing. So I don't think that there's going to be that level of connection. Obviously, there's a big talent downgrade and also just a rapport between quarterback and wide receiver. But Osborne is still coming through as one of the slate's top values because that's how poor that kind of sub-6, sub-4K range especially is on this slate. So much of the production on both sides is just going to the top plays. So you get pretty weak projections on this range. So Osborne looks like a cash play. And I think that that's going to lead to less ownership for somebody like Conklin, who is probably never going to find an optimal lineup on reception volume, on yardage, but he will find a ceiling if, he's the one that's soaking up some of those red zone targets, some of those end zone targets, especially if there's more attention being paid to Justin Jefferson. So I think for $600 more, it's definitely not a projection play, kind of an IKB play, if you will. But if he's the one that's falling into the end zone ahead of somebody like Osborne, even if he doesn't get there from a yardage or reception total, I think that the ownership projection the ownership may come in a little bit wider than we're projecting, where we see Osborne soak up even more and Conklin come in a little bit less. So I like that play in tournaments.
John asked about DD Westbrook versus Ray McLeod, and you mentioned how there's not much value on this slate at the cheap end. We only have DD for 4 points, and we only have Ray for 3.6 here. Obviously there's some guesswork with DD. This has not been a team, though, that has thrown to number 3 wide receivers a ton this year. But I could see DD Westbrook, former Biletnikoff winner, at least getting some run in 3 wide receiver sets. Do you have interest in DD or Ray? And do you have a preference between those two?
Yeah, first of all, shout out to John because he shipped, it might have been the Sunday night slate or the Monday night slate, but he shipped a slate recently, like chopped it up 3 ways for like $400,000. So,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Big win for John. So I don't know why he's asking me questions, but between DD and Ray, I think they kind of grade out as very similar plays. I don't necessarily have a lean one way or another, but I think these are the type of plays that we're going to be mixing in to these lineups where we're trying to prioritize as many of the high value, the high volume plays as we can. It kind of feels like DD is just going to take over what KJ Osborne was previously doing. And if we think that's the case, KJ Osborne was coming into this slate at like 4,000, 4,400 before Thielen was ruled out. So I think, we get a pretty cheap tag on DD. And yeah, they don't utilize their third wide receiver too often. But these are kind of the type of plays we have to make in order to build lineups. And then similarly with Ray, he's playing more snaps kind of as the slot guy. Then James Washington comes in with a much better price tag. Again, as kind of one of these low-owned dart throws, have no issues playing either of those guys. I do think we get a little bit better ownership on Ray just given the Adam Thielen news on the Viking side.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. I think that Ray's role is more clear cut, right? Like you would be shocked to see Ray just like, play every snap and have a big role. We don't know what's going to happen with Thielen out. And so there's more I think there's more downside certainly on DD. There's also more upside, I think, on DD to do something that we didn't expect. Like we don't know what their plan is without Thielen. And so you introduce some variance there, which I think is good on DD. Okay. The story is Justin Jefferson. Can you find a fade on Justin Jefferson, who is just, you can make a case he's the best wide receiver in the NFL right now, period. And with Thielen out, my God, I think we have Justin Jefferson for over 10 targets in this game, and his catch rate is ridiculous, as Mark mentioned on the betting show earlier today, better catch rate than Deontay Johnson, despite having a similar target projection. It's hard to make lineups with Justin Jefferson. I get it. I feel like that's the kind of stuff, though, that wins showdown slates. What do you think about finding Justin Jefferson fades?
This is kind of the weird part of this entire slate, where the best values are the highest price plays. Like if you just go through and do a point per dollar value projection, Justin Jefferson and Deontay Johnson grade out as two of the best plays on the entire slate. So then you're really forced into these builds where optimizers want to force these guys in, and then you're stuck with the Ray McLeods and the DD Westbrooks of the world, and kickers, who we'll get to in a second, will be a big topic of discussion for this slate. I think if you want to play Jefferson, you do need to find ways to get different, especially if you're rostering him at captain. I think we're a little bit light, probably even at 21% now that Dalvin's ruled in. I think that could go up even more because Madison just graded out as such a good play in that same range. But Jefferson's underpriced. For the role that we're projecting, we're comfortably paying $12K for these types of receivers on slates past. So I think that if you are going to play him, which I will likely match the field, if not get over that captain ownership. I want to do something strange like not play him with Kirk Cousins and just assume that he soaks up like 75% of the Vikings pass production, right? So I think you can get away with that type of stuff, and we've seen that be successful on slates past, where you get these massive alpha receivers who just soak up so much of their team's reception volume, and the quarterback just doesn't offer anything else outside of that. So Captain Jefferson teams without Cousins make a whole lot of sense. I'm running an MME set, so I won't be doing that on every Captain Jefferson team, but I think that's something you should reserve a portion of your Captain Justin Jefferson teams for.
Speaking of alphas, Deontay Johnson now has 10 plus targets in 20 out of his last 27 games. And he's left the games where he hasn't, he's left like 3 or 4 of them early. This dude is like a stone lock for 10 plus targets. When you're seeing that much volume, you can find a big ceiling. All it takes is like a 5-yard slant from Big Ben and break one, and Deontay can break the slate for sure. And then I also wanted to point out that Chase Claypool was limited on Sunday with some toe issue. Chase Claypool was full practice Tuesday, full practice Wednesday. I think he'll be ready to go. So I have interest in both of these guys for sure. Like, I don't think it's out of the realm at all for Deontay to outscore Justin Jefferson here. Like, and ownership projection, we're getting a little bit of leverage on it, not a ton, but I think enough to at least make Deontay in the conversation. It's going to be really hard to fit both these guys though, right? And I bet a lot of people are going to try to fit both Jefferson and Deontay. So what do you think about the Steelers receivers?
Deontay he's Cooper Kupp light. I think you've mentioned that. He's Devontae Adams light. He's just getting so much volume that even with Big Ben as his quarterback, he's finding ways to produce. Even in games where he doesn't find the end zone, you're getting just massive reception totals. You're getting massive yardage totals. And on PPR-friendly sites like DraftKings, that can often be enough. So yes, I love Deontay. I think that teams will try and find ways to roster both he and Jefferson. So I think that combination will be pretty popular with some low-owned plays, some kickers thrown in there. You mentioned Claypool. I love Claypool. We talk about this often on Showdown slates, finding these alpha wide receivers with high ADOTs, high air yard totals at low ownership. And I think if anything, we might get a little bit of an ownership discount on Claypool off of what's projected. And Big Ben has been atrocious throwing the deep ball. And I think it's only going to get worse as the season continues to go on and he takes more hits and throws more balls. But we get the dome game. Hopefully the line can hold up and give him some shots to hit Claypool deep. And with these type of players like Claypool, it only takes 1 or 2. So 7% ownership, if that's a little heavy, I really want to be on top of that.
Agreed. Anything on any other receivers, James Washington or anything like that? I don't really think James Washington is going to be in play for me too much at that price tag. But any other receivers you want to mention?
Yeah, the 5K price tag on Washington is tough because he still has to do something to get there. Like the $2,200 for Ray, a couple catches could be enough for him. But at 5K, James Washington actually has to produce to find his way onto winning lineups. We should mention Freiermuth, natural born touchdown scorer, Pat Freiermuth.
Shout out Penn State.
Shout out Penn State. He's going to be even less owned than someone like Conklin. He's $400 more expensive, projects a little bit worse. So that ownership projection is fairly similar. I think that could come down on Freiermuth a little bit. And, same type of thing with Conklin. He's probably not going to get there on yardage or reception alone, but if he's the one that finds his way into the end zone, you're kind of betting on touchdowns with these guys, but you get pretty good ownership leverage in those situations.
I actually prefer Freiermuth to Conklin straight up. I know we have Conklin 0.3 ahead, but I think Freiermuth is just straight up better player, better play, better touchdown score, and he went to Penn State. Okay, kicker and defense on this slate. We mentioned that there's not a lot of cheap plays. That's going to lead a lot of people to start playing kicker and defense. I know nothing infuriates Cody more than defenses breaking slates. What do you think about kicker and defense in this setup?
Kickers for sure are among the best plays on the slate, and that's just the way it is. They grade out, they project as some of the best plays on the slate. They offer the salary relief for you to get in the Justin Jeffersons and the Deontay Johnsons of the world. We just don't have similarly priced skill position players that can even compete with these guys. So it's going to be frustrating. You're never excited to sweat out kickers in the 9 or 8 or 10 points that you're going to get from them. But especially in cash games, I think this is a double kicker slate. And I've got no issues rostering one or both in tournaments as well. It seems like the ownership's pretty fair given how well they project. Now on the defensive side, I think we have so many skill position players that are going to want to be forced in that it gets to this awkward point where you're like playing 3 opposing skill position players against the defense, and no one feels good about that. So I think we get pretty reasonable ownership on both of the defenses. And look, it's Big Ben and Kirk Cousins, and Cousins is taking care of the ball well this year. Hasn't thrown too many picks, but without Thielen, maybe the rapport is worse with the receivers. Maybe you get one of those pick 6 opportunities for the Steelers defense. And as you mentioned, they can really put pressure on opposing offenses. That defense can. So, on the other side, it's Big Ben. So, no issues rostering either of these defenses. And I think you can do something as weird in a way to get unique as, with Justin Jefferson at captain. I think you can do the captain Justin Jefferson with the Steelers defense. And especially if you're running out these 4-2 or 5-1 or 2-4, 1-5 teams, pairing the defense with those, the strong side of those stacks makes a lot of sense too.
Steelers defense for me is in play every week from a schematic perspective. They're going to be very blitz happy. They have really good pass rush. Kirk Cousins is going to make a ton of mistakes. And of course, Vikings defense, Big Ben is liable to throw pick 6s at any chance, at any time. You guys can start getting in questions right now. We have maybe 3 or 4 minutes before we can get to the flag plants. By the way, corporate has told me that we cannot do the flag plants tonight unless we get 100 likes on this very video. Would you ever fade both QBs? Asked Wallace. What about lineups that don't include either quarterback tonight?
Yeah, just based off of historical data, it's very, very unlikely that winning lineups don't have at least one quarterback. But again, this is a slate where so much of the fantasy points are going to flow through some of the top plays, just a few guys. So I think you can soak up a lot of the production. I don't necessarily create a group to make sure we force in a quarterback, but I think it's pretty unlikely, especially if you're just hand building a few lineups, that the winning lineups don't have one quarterback.
Still, Curtin wants to know chances of a kicker outscoring DD and Ray. Obviously, we have it projected that way. I think if you ran a sim or something like that, you would see that kickers are going to outscore DD and Ray a large percentage of the time. The difference is that DD and Ray, at least in theory, could take like a 60-yard pass to the house. Obviously, kickers can't do that. What do you think about this question from Steel Curtain?
Yeah, and that goes back to just the point of not needing an absolute ceiling from everyone in your lineup. So what are the chances of a kicker outscoring either of those guys or both of those guys? I would say it's very likely. If you're really chasing like a 15 to 20 point ceiling, I think that you're hoping for the touchdown and the long play from a guy like DD or Ray is more likely. But just straight up outscoring them is the kickers for sure.
A lot of people asking about our favorite captains. We'll get to that in the flag plan section, although I'm afraid that Cody and I both have the same flag plan already. So I better go first here because I do not have a backup plan at flag plan. From John, do you think Osborne has enough upside for captain consideration? Good question. You know, I think KJ Osborne will run a route on 100% of Kirk Cousins dropbacks tonight. And to me, that's good enough to find a ceiling at 5,600. What do you think, Cody, about Osborne captains?
Yeah, I'm having a really tough time getting outside of that top group of Justin Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, Dalvin Cook, Naji. Man, it's going to be tough. But the thing about Osborne is you're kind of playing into a little bit of ownership too for a guy that's only 5,600 and hasn't really shown a ceiling. I know this is a different role for him, but he's not going to be unowned. He grades out as a good play, so people are gonna find their way there. I would concentrate most of my exposure to that top group.
Young Phil says corporate sounds like they're Gen Z with all this love for goofy thumbnails and shilling for likes. I got to tell you, man, like we're such boomers. We had to hire a bunch of Gen Z people to get our YouTube, our Instagram, our Facebook game on track. So yeah,
the social team is so good.
They're the best.
The video team is so good.
The best. Chris Herndon take. I saw a couple of Chris Herndon takes. Chris Herndon has been a longtime favorite of the fantasy community, and I guess people still want to play him here, even though we have a 1.3 point projection on Chris Herndon. Any love for him?
Yeah, you know, I do the dart throw section in the article, just some of my favorite low owned, really unlikely type of plays that are going to make winning lineups. And I didn't even look at Chris Herndon. So I don't know what type of routes he's running now alongside Tyler Conklin, but if he's got a projection and he's active, he's in play. So that's really all I can say.
Chris Herndon ran 9 routes last week, which wasn't really a bump off of previous weeks for him with Thielen out. So I don't think that Chris Herndon really gains much with Thielen out, but it just kind of is what it is on Thielen. His last 3 games, his routes run were 8, 5, and 9. Yeah, what about playing Madison? I mean, that's super concerning. Nobody's going to play Madison now. What if Cook aggravates or the Schefter report is wrong? I mean, that's an interesting one to me. If I was playing like 150 lineups, what about Madison?
I'm going to redo ownership after the show, and I think we had Madison at like 14% right now after the Schefter report and everybody having access to that news well in advance. I think that the Cook ownership is going to come up and the Madison ownership is going to come down even more, probably sub 10%. Yeah, I mean, if you want to bank on re-injury or, like I said, he's going to be used as a decoy or whatever it may be, or the backfield is just more split and Madison's the one that runs hot on touchdown efficiency, I can't talk you off of that at sub 10%. That's the kind of weird stuff that wins showdown slates, but it's just not a math play. You're just kind of banking on either Cook being re-injured or the reports being wrong.
Who's more likely to get work, Ray or Jay Wash? I think Ray is the preferred slot guy, and Jay Wash is actually the number 4 wide receiver. And so I think Ray will be on the field a little bit more. Do you agree with that, Cody?
Yep, that's how I see it. You're going to get more playing time, more routes for Ray, and he's much cheaper.
A couple people have asked about kickoff and punt return. I didn't even look at this, but people always want to do the double dip. They want Ray and they want the Steelers defense. They want to get points for both. I don't know if you looked at this at all, but I actually, like, maybe for Showdown it's different, but we actually looked at this like a few years ago for main slates, and like it was just torching money trying to do this in main slates. I don't know about Showdown though.
The funny thing about Showdown is you get Ray who's like an okay, low owned dart throw type of play. And then if you want to just use this as like a tiebreaker for him and DD or something like that, I did look it up. He is both the punt and kick returner. So if you want to do the CSU double dip and roster Steelers defense with Ray, he should be back there returning kicks and punts.
All right. We just need a few more thumbs up here before we get to the flag plan section of the show. Cody, I'm pretty confident that we both have the same flag plan. Do you want to pivot or shall I pivot?
No, go ahead, because I'm starting to get nervous about this guy's ownership if we're both on him and the chat's on him. So why don't you go for it?
Okay. All right. I'll let you guys off the hook. Bath time for the kids. Need your flag plan. Yes, I understand, Sean. Flag plan for me is a no-brainer. This is a guy in the PSM who, I mean, my God, things that Chase Claypool did last year around the goal line and deep down the field were like eye-opening. I know people wanted to move him to tight end when he came into the league. I mean, this guy is a massive human playing wide receiver, I think, at a really high level. I think the way that Ben has played this year has not been conducive to big Chase Claypool games at all. But in the dome against a bad pass defense, I mean, this is the spot for Chase Claypool, who has full practice in 2 straight games off the toe injury. I think he's going to play 100% of the snaps tonight. So I would go with Chase Claypool. I'm pretty sure that's what Cody was going to do as well. So now, Cody, go ahead and pivot.
Yeah, I'm starting to get worried now because the chat's talking about it. You've got him as your flag plant. He was going to be my flag plant. I'm going to quickly pivot to the second most expensive player on the entire slate. Not going to be completely unowned, but I think he will be underowned relative to his chances of finishing in the optimal lineup. That is Dalvin Cook. Mike Zimmer is not playing scared. Mike Zimmer is not playing Dalvin Cook 50% of his role. Mike Zimmer is not playing Dalvin Cook 75% of his role. I think we get a big role for Dalvin Cook in the shoulder harness. I think he produces. I think Mike Zimmer is still convinced that this team is going to the playoffs. I think Mike Zimmer is still convinced that this team can make some noise in the playoffs. And I think that in his mind, the best way to do that is to establish it, and to establish it with Dalvin Cook. So at home, as 3.5-point favorites against the Steelers rush defense that can be run on, I think we get Dalvin Cook as the optimal captain.
Yeah, I like that for sure. And I do think that ham builders will be afraid to click Dalvin Cook. I think everybody clicks Justin Jefferson and Deontay Johnson before Dalvin Cook, given all the injury stuff that has gone around. Well, one other thing, I don't know if you looked at Dan Chisena. I don't even know how to say his name, but Vikings fans are apparently on him. I guess I could see it. We didn't mention him at all. Anything on Chisena before we get out of here?
I think he had like a sub 1 point fantasy point projection, so I don't think he made like my research cut. But he is. I think he is going to be active as like the 4th wide receiver. So maybe we should look in a little bit more. And Mark and I can talk about that and see if we need to give him a little bit of a bump in terms of projection.
Adam Thielen went down very early in last week's game, and Chisena only ran 5 routes and played 5 snaps in the entire game. So, yeah. Okay. That is going to do it for this showdown breakdown. Appreciate y'all being here. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. Helps us out. A bunch can continue to bring you free content like this. For Cody, for producer Adam, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.